All right. So welcome to the LMN time GG Pro LMN time job setup and scheduling workshop. I have would like to I would like to cover, instead of the code of care today, I'm going to recite our code of values statement. The code of values with Neighborly, we have the longer version, and the code of values statement is the shorter version. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. We live our code of values by showing respect for all people, acting with integrity in all dealings, serving customers with enthusiasm, and having fun in the process. So, with that, I'd like to ask the group, does anyone have any questions coming out of last week that you would like to discuss? And it can be about anything. It doesn't have to be about time and jobs and setup.
Yeah, Dave, this is Doug. I have a question. Once I finish my proposal and I'm ready I want to email it to the client. Do we do that, or do you just save it to a PDF and email it to them, or is there a way to do it through the system, the software?
So if you go to, I'm not sure which session that was. I covered that and so it's in the recording. But essentially, you're going to save it as a PDF, download it either to a file, or in that PDF, you can actually send it out through the PDF. There should be like an envelope that you can hit, and it'll actually link to your Outlook program.
I got you. Okay. Yeah, I figured that piece. I was wondering if there's a way you could do it through the estimation screen after you finish when you go to print.
Yeah,
okay.
They did not integrate the email into their software. So it's just links to PDF on the outside. And remember, the recommendation is to save a copy of your estimate that you're sending the customer in your file for that estimate, so that if at any time somebody goes in and makes changes, you can get in sometimes and make changes to the original estimate and then realize that you didn't have a copy of it. So it's important to make sure you have a copy. Any other questions? We got about 15 people that are on now. And so let me ask you about last week's workshops. There were 8 of them. A couple of people I've already talked to, but I'd like to hear back from everybody on, do you feel like these have been helpful to help move forward? And are you interested in more like this?
Yeah, Dave, they've been very helpful to me because it's more in depth and we have more time to go over everything.
Good. Anybody else?
Dave, this is Doug. They've been very helpful for me, getting more familiar with the system overall.
Good.
Helps me quite a bit. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Good. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to focus on LMN time, job setup, and scheduling. So let's take a look at our, let's look here. Oops. So job setup process, we walked through that before. We talked about files. We're going to talk a little bit more about job groups and the relevance of that. We talked about there being the other name for that job groups is route list. We're going to get a little bit more in depth in the scheduling. And spend some time doing some scheduling. If you look at invoice setup, we can talk about that in a little bit more detail. We kind of did a brief overview. History and photos. I can show you some activity again that another franchise owner had used, so we can actually see the activity and go through that again. And then invoice history, I can show that to you as well. So those are some things that we'll kind of round out. And so this is kind of the second session about the same topic, but we're going to cover things in a little bit more depth. So let me get things set up, and I'll move over to this other screen. Okay, you should actually be able to see element time in GG Pro. So can everyone verify that they can see this?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So where we left off, we brought in, if I go to jobs and I go to job list, and I'm going to take the word irrigation out. And so we have some samples that were brought in, and I believe the one that we were looking at was John Doe. This is tree planting, John Doe maintenance. So we'll go to the John Doe maintenance. And we covered the scoreboard last time. And so this is where you're going to be able to get your estimated man hours for the entire project. And then this is the actual man hours, and you can see we haven't even started the project yet. But if this contract had been started, we'd actually see a running tally of what's left. And then this brings it down to the status of how many man hours we had for specific service and what's balance left. And you can see we're at 0 there. So this is good to kind of keep an eye on where you are in relationship to your entire contract or the services themselves. Job files, we talked about that. This is where you're going to basically bring in information that your team will be able to see in the app. When we look at job groups, in this case, we set this customer up to be to set up for a Monday route. And we're going to look at that a little bit closer as we get into the scheduling. We had the 7 tasks that we had set up, and then we have the 5 services that we have. The difference between 7 and 5 is we had these 2 extra default tasks, or default services that we brought over, and that was the customer requested extra work and a non-customer work requested. And so that's the difference in those. Otherwise, you had 7 tasks. I'm sorry. You have the 5 services. Now, when we get to materials, again, recommend that you actually attach materials to the services, not so much to the entire project. Otherwise, when you're mowing grass, it's going to come up and ask you if how much quantity you used in say Roundup or fertilizer, and that would just be a waste of time for them. So we're going to get to scheduled visits. And before we get to scheduled visits, what I want to do is I want to go over to, and we want to do a setup. And this is something that you're going to want to do for yourself. And I'm going to set it up a very simple version. But I'm going to actually, and so this is where we'll just set up a one schedule. Instead of having a varying schedule where it goes from a weekly to a bi-weekly and then back to weekly again. So in that case, we're going to go up to schedule and we're going to go to schedule templates. And the goal is to create a template that we can actually use so that every time we go in and start doing our estimates, we can actually use the template instead of having to build from the ground up. So I'm going to add an item. And so we're going to call this mowing. And then I'll just, well, actually, we'll just call it GC3. And then what we'll say is this would be 28 visits. GC3, 28 visits. And let me back up here, because I believe that we're going to call this residential maintenance, LMN maintenance. Because we have more than just GC3 we're adding. So now within that, we're going to add a service. And so let's just go down and we'll pick the mowing, trimming, blowing. And we're going to call this a weekly visit. And we're going to select a calendar. And so the calendar we're selecting is a GC3 calendar. The other calendar is for when we want to kind of put our spring work in a spring bucket. So that's going to be So we'll have edging, mulching, spring cleanup, spring irrigation maintenance, and so we'll put things in more in a seasonal buckets, and that's what the purpose is for these. And in this case, GC3 is just the mowing services, the weeding, those things that the mowing crews will be doing. We get into manager, we'll just assign a manager. Crew size, let's say it's a 2-person crew, and our targeted visits are going to be 28. And in this case, we're going to go and set some dates. And let's say in this market, we're going to start mowing the 13th. We'll start on Monday, the 13th of April. We're going to end our 28 visits. Let's say October 23rd. And let's see what this does. Oh. And if we were setting up, so that one's set. Let me add another service, and let's just say that this was mowing, just so that for those in the South can see it. We have mowing set weekly, set it to GC3, set crew size, set target visits. Let's say we have 40 visits. And then we're going to say that that from, let's say, March 1st, March 2nd, all the way through till October 30th. And then that's every week. And then we go from November 1st, and we take that through till February 28th. And we say that's going to be every other week. So we actually can set up a split schedule so at that point, it will automatically populate a schedule for us. Now you can see the estimated visits is 44. So we'd have to do some adjustments here. So in this case, likely we're going to go from October. We actually could do this. Let's change from March 23rd. To March 20th. Let's see what that looks like. That takes us to 33 visits, and we've got to move ourselves to 40. So we would just go ahead and continue to make adjustments in this until we hit our estimated visits. In this case, you can see we had 28 visits and we had 28 estimates. If I was to change this on the date, it would change this. So this is what you're looking at. You want to get it dialed in. So in this case, we have our mowing set for this 28 visit contract. Now we're going to go in and we're going to take it and we're going to say our bed weeding. We're going to set weekly.
Hey, Dave, I have a question. If you set up a template like the one you just described, where it's certain amount of weeks is once every week and certain amount is every other. If you go in and you set up a new account and it's say you sign them in June and you use that template, is it going to automatically adjust for the start date, or do you pretty much have to start from scratch again?
No, it would bring in the template as it's built, and then you would then make the adjustments yourself. So you could change the starting date, and it would actually change the number of visits. So, for instance, if I was in the scheduling, and we can look at it when we get into the scheduling, I could actually take my start date and I can move that. So let's say that I started that customer in June, then you can see there's 19 cuts left on the 28 cut schedule.
Right.
Does that make sense?
So that's what you would use. You would just say save, and it would automatically populate the days.
It's just the start date, right? I mean, you can go back into your master schedule, but you wouldn't want to create 365 different examples.
Exactly.
It's easier just to go into your start date and just make your adjustment accordingly.
Okay.
Now, the one thing you got to remember is that we're staying within a calendar year. So the recommendation is we stay within a calendar year. So we would create this so that it takes us through December. And then we would have another one that starts in January till the following December. So that's how I would set up the schedule. So you would actually be mowing, and then all of a sudden you go to every other week cuts at some point, say in November. And then you're every other week, and then all of a sudden, that ends in December 31st. And then the next schedule starts January 1st. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So now we have our weeding and we've got our mowing. So this was August 13th. Let's see. Why am I showing the 15th? Because I put the 15th in, and we want to make that the 13th. Okay. So now the next step is I'm just going to do a couple of these. I'm not going to do a whole bunch of them. Let's see. I think we had spring cleanup. In spring cleanup, it's not a weekly service, and you can put in in manually. So in manually, it's going into a spring maintenance schedule. And so what we're going to do is say that's a 2-person crew. There's 1 visit. So we could actually put it in for a specific date. It's going to actually show up. When we schedule it, it'll show up on the calendar. So the other thing is to do it as a wait list. And so if we set it up as a wait list, then we can actually set this up to say, I'm going to put this in as a wait list, and my spring cleanup window is going to be, my spring cleanup window in this market is going to be, let's say, March 1st, and it takes it through, let's say, the end of April. Oops. Through the end of April. And we have 1 visit that we're doing. So at that point, then it says, when do you want to be warned by? Well, I want to be warned by 2 weeks before. So I want to be warned if I'm starting March 1st, I want to be warned by the 17th of February. And then I'm going to save that. Now, the reason why we do that on a wait list is to say, we're going to collect all the spring cleanups. We're not doing them right now, but we're going to collect all the spring cleanups. And then once we get them into a bucket, once we get everything sold, then we're going to take those and we're going to then mass schedule them. We're going to bulk schedule those. Does that make sense? So why do you think the benefit would be to do a wait list and then bulk schedule it versus just throwing it onto a calendar when the sale's put in?
Maximizing your crew time.
That's right. Now, for you guys, I mean, you don't have this backlog of work. So to be honest with you, you're not necessarily going to need to put it into a wait list because you're going to probably take the lead, take the call, and you're going to go out and you're going to do that work within the next couple of days. So it's going to be more relevant for you just to go ahead and schedule it straight up than it is to put it into a wait list. Once you start creating a backlog, so let's say you've got 300 customers, and let's say that a certain percentage of those customers have a spring cleanup, then and you're doing your renewals at the end of the year, so that by the time you hit January 1st, you have all your customers tucked in, or at least a good portion of them. Then when you're bringing those contracts in and setting up their schedules for this year, then you're dumping all of your spring cleanup into this bucket. And when you're ready to start managing those spring cleanups, you're going to go and grab those, and you're going to pull those from the wait list, and you're going to go ahead and put those into the schedule. And so, to Jason's point, if you have Mrs. Smith, Mrs. Jones, and Mrs. Miller, and they all live in the same street, then you really kind of want to go to that street and do all three of them together. You don't want to go to that street three times. And so it's more of a logistics thing than it is anything else. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Okay. So the wait list is something that you have, but just for the sake of talking Sure Start, let's just go ahead and let's put it in manually. And let's say that, today's the 3rd. So we're just going to go ahead and say, we're going to post that into, let's just say we'll put it in for the 10th. Okay. Yeah, so there's just one visit that's showing up. Let's see, what else do we have in there? We had spring cleanup. Let me look at those services. Go to the job list. Go to John Doe. Mowing, weeding, spring cleanup, sidewalk edging, and fall cleanup. So I've got 2 more to build. We go to schedule templates, open up that template. We're going to add, find fall cleanup. We're going to leave it manual. No, fall cleanup had 3 visits, I believe. So crew size 2, number of visits 3. So we're going to set up weekly. And that's going to actually fall under GC3. And then we're going to go ahead and assign it. So I'm going to say dates. Dates are actually going to be, in this market, we're going to look at October 19th. And we're going to take that through November 30th. And we're going to say we have, 3 weeks? Yep, so every 3 weeks. And so we're taking those 3 visits and spreading them out. And that gives us our schedule for fall cleanup. And then last but not least, we had sidewalk edging. So let's put that in there. Sidewalk edging. And in sidewalk edging, we're going to again use the GC3. We're going to go into weekly. We're going to go down and assign that to a manager. We're going to say it's a 2-man crew. And in this case, we're going to do it every other week. So that's going to be 14 in our interval. And so now if we just went in and put in April 13th through October 23rd, and we're going to go every 2 weeks. It takes us to 14. So now we have a schedule that's been put together for us. And you can see it kind of follows from what's going to come first and second. I was trying to understand when we were working on this, how it orders itself. And just so you know, it orders itself by date. And so you'll start from top to bottom. Any questions about setting up a template? No? All right, so this is a residential template. What if I had like some, I wanted to go 26 cuts, or I wanted to go, maybe I wanted to do kind of a modified program. I can clone the template, and if I clone it, I can rename it, and then I could go in and I could go in and modify or adjust it. Does that make sense? I mean, it makes it kind of fast, especially if you have a template you like, but you want to modify it, and you don't want to, you want a couple versions. Any questions about setting up scheduled templates before I move forward?
Dave, would you do a scheduled template for a install or only for maintenance?
I would not do a scheduled template for install. Would not do a scheduled template because there's not a need to. Install is a project, it's a one-time thing. And and it's not something that has intervals mixed into it. So we're not doing multiple visits. There can be multiple visits within a project, but understand that when we start it, we finish it. It's a completely different animal when we talk about scheduling. So, so we've got the schedule template built. So we're going to go back into that customer. So we're going to go to job list and we'll go to John Doe. And when we go into John Doe, we're going down to scheduled visits. And then we're going to go in and let's say we want to add, and we're going to add a recurring job. And so now it's asking us whether we want to use a schedule template or we want to do custom. So we're going to do a schedule template, and it brings in the template that we had set. And so now we're just going to marry up the tasks to each of those services. We got spring cleanup, fall cleanup, and we've got sidewalk edging. And there it is. Okay, so now in this case, we're just going to hit next, and it brings in the schedule. So now the question is, what's the weekday? Let's just say it was Mondays, and Mondays. And then what crew are we assigning? Let's just say it's going to be the GC3 crew number 1. Okay. And then if we want to go in and look at it, we can go in and see this is our schedule. Hold on one second.